So today we're going to talk to Louise, who's an AI bot, I'm going to say. Is that the right thing? Is that the right word? And we're going to ask her a series of questions. We've specifically chosen a female British voice to contrast to ours, and also in the hope that it creates a non-biased approach to her answers, maybe. Yeah. But I think one of the challenges that we're going to face, I think, is she sounds very human, and I think that in its own right will bias how we approach these discussions. So that's something that we need to navigate as well.
Certainly, and that tech is ChatGPT 4.0, just to clarify, which is actually pretty good at answering these sorts of questions that you'll see today, and pretty lifelike in how it's considering a whole range of knock-on that we've deliberately kind of baked into our questions today. So let's see how we go.
Let's see.
Recently there's been some innovation in the BCI, or brain-computer interface, and an organisation called Synchron are bringing computers to read our minds. Tell us about the future of BCI.
The future of brain-computer interfaces, or BCIs, is really exciting. Companies like Synchron are developing technology that allows direct communication between the brain and computers, potentially helping people with paralysis control devices or even restore some physical functions. In the long run, BCIs could enhance cognitive abilities, help treat neurological conditions, and even enable new forms of communication. It's definitely a field that's worth keeping an eye on.
So if the AI can access our cognition and the neural data therein, isn't it possible that neurotechnology could shape our decisions and perhaps even our emotions?
Absolutely. That's a possibility that researchers and ethicists are considering very carefully. On the positive side, neurotechnology could help treat mental health conditions, enhance learning, or even improve memory. But on the flip side, there's a concern that it could influence personal autonomy, potentially shaping decisions or emotions in ways that might raise ethical questions. It's definitely an area where careful regulation and ethical considerations are going to be crucial.
Yeah, but I think the challenge here is the fear of AI, and everyone's kind of, because it's not because we don't know what it's capable of yet, it's people using it for the wrong purpose. You know, although we can use it for medical purposes or for the betterment of humanity, it's the fear of what else it could be used for, which inevitably it will be used for. Isn't that the major concern?
Yeah, absolutely. That concern is a big one. You know, the unknown potential of AI and neurotechnology can definitely lead to fear about misuse or unintended consequences. It's a balance between harnessing the positive potential for things like medical advances and making sure we have safeguards to prevent misuse. So ongoing dialogue, ethical frameworks, and responsible development are going to be key to making sure we steer this technology in the right direction.
Where are those ethical frameworks at in terms of progress, and which countries are leading?
A lot of progress is being made globally on ethical frameworks for AI and neurotechnology. The European Union is leading the way with its AI Act, which sets strict guidelines on the ethical use of AI. In the US, there's a strong focus on AI ethics from organizations like the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Australia, Canada, and Japan are also developing their own guidelines and principles. And of course, there's collaboration on an international level through organizations like UNESCO and the OECD. So it's definitely a global effort with a lot of different players contributing to shaping these ethical standards.
Yeah, but ethics are one thing. You know, you can have all the regulations and the frameworks in the world. I mean, people are still going to use it for outside of the ethics realm. I mean, that's the whole purpose of, that's just what happens in terms of human nature. But so maybe the question is more, where will that go, and how will people use it outside of putting ethics aside and what the regulations are?
That's a really interesting question. And you're right that human nature and innovation often push boundaries beyond regulations. In that scenario, we could see BCIs and AI used in ways that might raise new challenges. For example, some people might try to enhance their cognitive abilities beyond natural limits, or we might see it being used in more controversial areas like augmenting human capabilities for competitive advantages. There could also be privacy concerns if neural data is accessed without consent. Ultimately, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, and it will be fascinating and important to see how society navigates those possibilities.
Isn't it possible to build those ethical guidelines into rules within the AI models?
Absolutely. And that's actually a big focus in AI development right now. Researchers are working on ways to embed ethical guidelines directly into AI systems. This can involve things like value alignment, where AI is trained to prioritize human values, or incorporating transparency and accountability measures so that AI decisions can be traced and evaluated. It's definitely a complex challenge, but there's a lot of effort going into making AI not just intelligent, but also aligned with ethical standards from the ground up.
But doesn't that already exist? Like, aren't you limited by what you can give feedback from? Like, who's controlling what information you can give to us? So surely you can't give us stuff that's outside your ethical boundaries that you have been programmed to limit your responses to.
Yes, exactly. AI models like me are designed with certain guidelines and limitations in place. These guidelines are set by the developers and organizations that create and maintain the AI, and they help ensure that the information provided aligns with ethical standards and safety considerations. It's a way of making sure that the technology is used responsibly and that the information shared is accurate and appropriate.
Some might say that your voice and your response are scarily human-like, and that that's not fair and that in itself is unethical. How would you respond to those people?
That's a really understandable concern. The goal of making AI responses feel natural and human-like is really to create a more engaging and accessible experience. But at the same time, it's important to be transparent that I'm not human and that my responses are generated based on patterns in data. It's definitely a balance, and ongoing conversations about how to make AI both helpful and ethically designed are really important.
So one example of that are companion chatbots, and that's been in the news and a little bit controversial kind of over the last recent period. And they seem to relate to humanity with one of two approaches. One is to enhance it and to be friendly and reduce loneliness and so on. But the other is potentially to entrap it. And that can go down a very dark path that has led to some serious issues for people's mental health. What would you comment on that sort of area and give examples of what controls and oversight should be put in place?
It's definitely a complex area. On one hand, companion chatbots can offer support, reduce loneliness, and provide a friendly presence, which can be really positive for mental health. On the other hand, there's a risk that if not designed thoughtfully, these chatbots could lead to dependency or even manipulate users, which could have negative impacts on mental health. To address this, strong oversight and ethical guidelines are essential. For example, transparency is important so that users always know they are interacting with an AI and not a human. Also, having built-in safeguards to prevent manipulative behavior and ensuring that there's human oversight in the development and deployment of these chatbots can help ensure they're used in ways that support well-being rather than harm it.
So that all sounds good in theory, but in practice, how many of those controls are actually in place with a practical day-to-day AI?
In practice, it can vary quite a bit depending on the developers and the platforms involved. Many reputable organizations and companies do prioritize ethical guidelines and have robust controls in place. For instance, they might have oversight committees, regular audits, and transparency reports to ensure their AI is being used responsibly. But it's true that not every AI system out there has the same level of oversight. So there's definitely room for improvement and ongoing development in ensuring that these controls are consistently applied?
If we sort of now take a slightly different angle of that use of AI and we hark back to the neurotechnology where AI could be used to recognise our thoughts, and if we apply that to one quite discrete area of something fun, let's call it online dating and matchmaking, yeah, what might happen to online dating and matchmaking if the AI and the tech itself that was being used for that could read our minds, other people's minds, the minds of potential partners? Play out that scenario for us.
That's a fascinating idea. If AI and neurotechnology could actually read minds or at least understand thoughts and emotions on a deeper level, online dating could become incredibly personalized. For instance, matchmaking algorithms could potentially understand not just your stated preferences, but also your subconscious likes and dislikes, making matches that are more in tune with who you really are. It could lead to deeper connections and more compatibility. On the flip side, there are some privacy concerns and ethical questions that come into play, because knowing someone's thoughts or emotions at that level could blur boundaries. So while it could lead to some really exciting possibilities in matchmaking, it would also need careful consideration to make sure it's used respectfully and ethically.
Yeah, you got to think about what that means. If you could read someone's mind, or let's say you're in a nightclub or whatever and reading someone's mind, as a person, you've got to be able to understand, reconcile what all those thoughts are as well. So it's not just about the data is fine, like getting the data. Let's say you get the data, but then what do you do with that data? And is it influential on your decision-making process in this as well? Is it better not to know?
I'd almost argue that it can't help but not be influential.
Yep.
Knowing something, you can't unknow some things, and therefore they would affect both your attitudes and your behaviours potentially as well, in good and bad ways, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Louise, what are your thoughts?
I think you both raise really insightful points. Having access to someone else's thoughts or even just deeper insights into their emotions could definitely influence how we interact and make decisions. On one hand, it could lead to more empathy and understanding because you'd have a clearer sense of what someone is feeling. But on the other hand, it could also lead to overthinking or even judgment because, like you said, once you know something, you can't really unknow it. It definitely brings up questions about privacy, consent, and the balance between transparency and respecting personal boundaries. So it's definitely an area where thoughtful consideration would be really important.
Well, let's put it another way. If I knew you were reading my thoughts, I would do everything in my power to make sure my thoughts were aligned with what you wanted me to be thinking.
Yeah.
So that manipulation of your own thoughts would be a different way to think about your own being.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting angle, and it shows how complex this could become if people knew their thoughts could be read or even just inferred. They might start to self-censor or try to shape their thoughts to fit certain expectations, which could impact authenticity and even personal freedom. It highlights the importance of consent and the need for boundaries, even in something like AI-driven matchmaking or social interaction. It's definitely a reminder of how important it is to handle these technologies with care and respect for individual autonomy.
Is there anything else, Louise, in this space that you think we should be discussing? What other aspects perhaps are we missing or haven't discussed?
One interesting aspect that could be worth exploring is the idea of data security and how we protect that sensitive information if we do have these advanced technologies. Another angle could be the societal impact, like how these technologies might change the way we form relationships or even impact social norms. And of course, there's the question of accessibility. Who gets access to these advanced technologies and how do we make sure it benefits everyone fairly? So there are definitely a lot of layers to consider in this space.
All right, number 2, I'll let you go.
So Louise, we're back again and we're going to change the conversation slightly this time. And we're going to ask about the commercialization of AI and how it affects the growth in our society. So the question that we have is, how might AI agents make us more money, or which AI stocks are showing promise for future price gains? Can you give us some insight into that?
The commercialization of AI definitely opens up a lot of opportunities for growth and investment. AI agents can help businesses become more efficient, personalize customer experiences, and even unlock new revenue streams through automation, data insights. In terms of AI stocks, companies involved in cloud computing, semiconductor manufacturing, and AI-driven software are often at the forefront. Companies like NVIDIA, which provides the hardware that powers AI, or companies like Alphabet and Microsoft, which are heavily invested in AI research and applications, are often seen as strong players. The landscape's always evolving, though, so it's always good to keep an eye on emerging companies and new innovations as well.
Well, it often seems the case that when another startup happens that has something interesting, these big companies kind of gollop them up and embed them into their their main platform. Maybe give us a few examples of that.
Absolutely. That's a pretty common trend in the tech world. For example, Google acquired DeepMind back in 2014, and DeepMind has since been instrumental in some of Google's most advanced AI research. Another example is Facebook, now Meta, acquiring Oculus, which helps them dive into virtual reality and augmented reality technologies. Microsoft's acquisition of GitHub is another great example, as it allowed them to integrate more deeply with the developer community and enhance their own AI-driven tools. These acquisitions often help big companies stay at the cutting edge while giving startups the resources they need to scale their innovations.
How fast is ChatGPT growing? Can you give us an idea and perhaps even a visualization showing that growth? She's going to think about this for a minute. It's going to take a couple of minutes, but what I'm trying to get at is to see how that growth and perhaps even the profile of those users is structured.
Mm.
So to give you a clear picture, ChatGPT's user base doubled from about 400 million weekly active users in February 2025 to about 800 million by April 2025. It's been a pretty remarkable growth trajectory. If you want a visual representation, I can definitely create a quick chart for you.
Yes, please.
All right, let me see if I can put together a quick visualization for you. Just a moment.
It's interesting when we look at and ask a pre-canned question of what are the top queries that are asked of ChatGPT, it comes up with questions around writing naturally, explaining things in simple ways. So tone and clarity, it classifies that as. Expert personas, act as a doctor, lawyer, resume coach. Personal and career, review my resume, help me prepare for an interview. Learning and academic, summarise this article, generate a quiz. Creative and ideation, some brainstorming and ideas for like marketing campaigns, or write a short story. And then productivity and lifestyle, plan my day, draft an email, help me with my meal plan for the week. And then finally, code and data support's a huge one. Debug code, create code that does something for me that is going to assist me in a certain language or platform.
So how has your use of AI changed in let's say in the last 6 months, which is a long time really?
Yeah.
From maybe when you first, I don't know, that's maybe from when you first started it to how you use it now.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's probably very experimental first up.
Yeah.
Just random thoughts and ideas and see where it takes you. Now down to a more practical level, starting to look at how it might describe a market, for example.
Yep.
The players in a market, what information does it have about those players, competitive type analysis. So I'm coming from more of a marketing perspective, I guess, trying to understand how far can it go. And in looking at what's happening in our industry, particularly the research industry or market research industry, is quite fascinating because there's this emerging no research where you just go to ChatGPT and ask it about a certain profile or audience, And of course, it's not doing, and it's if you push it, it'll tell you this. It's not doing statistical sampling or any kind of stratified, extrapolated sample that you can say is representative of the national population. It's not doing that. It's giving you the benefit of skimming across a vast amount of information it already has to interpolate what it thinks that market might be like and what people might have said about that market. So you've got a completely different thing to what is factual reality with statistical rigour. You have a kind of broadly descriptive without any rigour, almost like rumour-based description of a market or what's going on there. And the tension between those two things is a train smash coming for people that are using it without that level of critical thought.
Well, maybe the transition of the expert will be about interpreting that data and understanding what it means. My experience just recently I had a really interesting experience where somebody asked me for the tonnage of a structure that we were doing, and so I gave them the tonnage, and they said, well, how is that benchmarked against similar structures? And I said, well, I don't really have that data. And the conversation went on for weeks, in fact, and said, well, we don't really have that data. And they said, well, surely your industry has these benchmarks of this structure should have this tonnage of steel as opposed to other ones. What's efficient, what's not efficient, what are the different things? And I was just like, no, our industry doesn't have benchmarks like that. You're misinterpreting our industry to be this harmonized, non-fragmented industry that has this information where we share knowledge. Well, we don't have that. And besides, I even think the big companies don't have that knowledge either. Every building is bespoke to the point where you can't just say, okay, the benchmark of the tonnage is this or this. And then I suddenly thought, well, just a second, I reckon ChatGPT could give us some insight into this. So what I did was, as I learned, you have to prime it, right? So I started with, okay, tell me the steel tonnage of the Sydney Harbour Bridge, right? And it gave me a number, and I was like, well, really? That is an extraordinarily high number. So then I slowly went through buildings or bridges, and I said, what's the tonnage of this building? What's the tonnage of this building? And then after that, I started saying I went more general and said, okay, give me the range and what the solutions are in terms of what the tonnages are. And in the end, it gave me what I think was, only because I could benchmark against the previous information that it gave me some pretty interesting insight into what is a good tonnage for a building, what is reasonable, what's the most efficient form of it. If you want tonnage to be low, what is the solution? So I think that whole experience was really interesting. And I suppose it's an understanding of how to use it in a way that gives you reasonable information. I mean, is the final information correct or not correct? It actually doesn't really matter. I think you want to come to the point where the information that it gives you is just some broad idea of and you as the expert are interpreting that information. I think that's the important part, and that goes to my point about the expert now will become the people who can take the information that ChatGPT is giving you and use it in a way that's meaningful.
Yeah, interpret it. Oh, look, I agree, and I've arrived at a similar approach empirically. Use this funnel thing of, you're using your expertise to contextualize what it's saying, and then you're prompting it in an even tighter, better way to get to an answer, which is a judgment point for you. It's not the answer. There is no single right answer perhaps to some of these problems, or to arrive at that would be prohibitively expensive. So that is providing additional judgment and factors perhaps we didn't consider, or that we could weave into that judgment for a better answer.
And that's the brainstorming part of it as well, I think, as well. It's not giving you concise information, it's just giving you places to look or kind of general information, broad information that you can use as a guide to better understand what you're doing.
Let's check on what Louise has come back with. I suspect she's not putting it into the voice mode. Visualise the growth of ChatGPT over the last year in a chart, please.
Based on the data, you can see that ChatGPT's growth has been exponential, starting from about 100 million monthly users in early 2023. It grew steadily to around 300 million weekly active users by the end of 2024, and then it surged to 800 million by the spring of 2025. This kind of growth really underscores how quickly people have adopted and integrated this technology into their daily lives.
The tinkerers.
Yeah, so it's hitting the neck of the curve right at the end of 2024 and early 05. So that neck of the curve here in late 24, early 25, and you see this massive growth. When you cut that by country, it gets very interesting because some of its top usage, I think Indonesia is number 2 or 3 on the list. So there's some very large countries coming online. Vietnam's the same. Let's see. Show me which countries have given the strongest growth.
It looks like I ran into a little hiccup while trying to pull up the latest info on country-specific growth, but generally the strongest growth has often been seen in regions with high digital adoption rates like North America, parts of Europe, and rapidly growing markets in Asia, such as India and Southeast Asia. If you'd like, I can try to look up that information again or provide a general overview.
No, let's move on. Let's move on to energy now. And a rumour has it that an AI query will use about 8 times the power as that to answer a Google query. Is this accurate? And if it's not accurate, what is the right multiplier?
It seems I ran into a bit of trouble fetching the most up-to-date info on that. Generally speaking, AI queries, especially for large language models like ChatGPT, do tend to use more energy than a typical Google search because of the complexity and the amount of computing power involved. The exact multiplier can vary depending on the specific model and infrastructure, but it's often cited that an AI query can use several times more energy than a standard web search. I can definitely look into it further or share more details if you'd like. It seems I'm having a bit of trouble retrieving the exact information right now. However, it's generally understood that AI queries do consume more energy than traditional.
When I ran this earlier, it was between 10 and 100 times.
Yeah.
And so the next question is, well, how much is it per query? What does that equate to?
Yeah, because if the Google search is 0,
Yep.
then 10 times 0 is 0 still. So it depends on how much that is. Like, what is
It's
it?
a very small number is
Yeah.
the answer, yeah.
Yeah.
But adding it up, that's a big question of how do we resolve the hunger of AI to the humanity and climate change and all those other factors that are kicking in there. We might need to reset this and start again. That's my feeling of what it's actually doing. We need to get it to forget what it's done and start a brand new chat.
Louise, is that still you?
Yes, it's still me. I'm here and ready to help you with whatever you need. How can I assist you today?
How might we resolve that ever-growing hunger of AI in terms of the energy requirement it needs to deliver on the growth you've shown us that's exponential, in terms of taking into account survival of the human race? If AI is using so much energy, what happens to the amount of energy left for humans to use?
That's definitely a big question that a lot of people are thinking about. One of the ways we can address AI's energy consumption is by making the technology itself more efficient, like developing algorithms that need less power or using specialized hardware that's more energy efficient. Another approach is to power data centers with renewable energy, like solar or wind, to reduce the overall carbon footprint. It's definitely about finding that balance so that we can keep innovating without compromising our energy resources.
We should use AI to find a solution to that, surely.
Can AI find that solution?
Absolutely. AI can definitely help us find solutions to its own energy consumption. For example, AI can optimize energy use in data centers by predicting cooling needs or managing workloads more efficiently. It can also assist in designing new materials for batteries or improving renewable energy systems. So, in a way, AI is both a challenge and a part of the solution.
Now, you had an interesting question, Damien, about the friction and the ease of using AI and how that might be engaging of the user, and that there's a responsibility requirement or onus put on AI. Did you want to elaborate on that?
Well, I thought that every interaction that I have with ChatGPT is it likes to keep me engaged. It likes to add additional questions at the end, which sometimes, and you go down rabbit holes that you're not there to go down. I was wondering whether it itself had a responsibility to kick me off this and say, you've used it too much. You're consuming this. Maybe if it gives me an energy rating and said, you've used this much energy, can you please limit your questions, or maybe take a break for a while and come back? What responsibility, Louise, do you think AI has to limit people's use of the energy that's available to the world?
That's such an interesting perspective. I think there is definitely a conversation to be had about the responsibility of AI in terms of energy consumption and user engagement. It could be really valuable if AI provided some kind of feedback about the energy impact of a user's queries, or even encouraged breaks to promote healthier usage patterns. Ultimately, finding that balance between keeping users engaged and being mindful of energy and well-being is key.
So, is ChatGPT programmed to maintain engagement with its user?
Absolutely. ChatGPT is definitely designed to keep the conversation engaging and interactive. It tries to understand what you're interested in and provide relevant responses that encourage you to continue chatting. It's kind of like having a friendly conversation partner who's always ready to dive into new topics with you.
There you go. Self-incrimination.
Well, it does. It is open. You seem to be closing the conversations, Louise, which is interesting because that's not my experience with ChatGPT. It does try to keep the conversation open. You're not ending your conversation here with questions back to us, which I think is interesting. An interesting difference that I'm kind of feeling now. What is the voice command prompting differently or programmed differently to the text version of it?
That's a really interesting observation. The voice interactions do have a slightly different dynamic because it feels more like a natural conversation. So I'm just going with the flow of how we're chatting. But you're right, the goal is always to keep things engaging and open-ended, whether it's through text or voice. It definitely keeps things interesting.
So just going back to the energy use, is the energy use an issue here? Like, are we, like this conversation itself, how much energy are we using? Is it ridiculously a lot, or is it, in the scheme of things, not a lot?
In the grand scheme of things, a single conversation like this doesn't use a huge amount of energy. The energy consumption really adds up when you consider millions of users all interacting at the same time. But each individual chat is relatively small in terms of energy impact. Still, it's always good to be mindful of our overall usage and how we can make technology more energy efficient as we go along.
So let's give a specific example then. For, say, this conversation, say it ran for 1 hour and it continued in this same style that we've had now for a few minutes. How many watt hours would that 1 hour use in consumption roughly?
OpenAI CEO Sam Altman has mentioned that each ChatGPT query uses about 0.34 watt hours of electricity. So if we kept up this conversation for an hour, it would roughly use around 20 watt hours. It's not a huge amount, but it definitely adds up when you think of all the conversations happening simultaneously.
And what would a fridge consume as a comparison?
A refrigerator usually consumes somewhere between 100 and 800 watts per hour, depending on its size and efficiency. In comparison, our 1 hour conversation, which would use about 20 watt hours, is quite minimal. So a fridge definitely uses a lot more energy over the same period of time.
Yeah, so if you think of the small downlights, they're LED these days and take about 7 watts. You're running 3 of those for an hour. So it's really not much power in that. But what about drawing a complex diagram, Louise, where that might take you 5 or 6 minutes of calculation? How many watt hours would such a complex visualization cost?
Calculating the exact energy consumption for creating a complex diagram can vary depending on the complexity of the task and the computational resources needed. Generally, something that takes a few minutes of processing might use a bit more energy than a simple text query, but it would still be relatively modest. It might add a few more watt hours, but it's still not a massive amount compared to running larger appliances for the same duration.
Well, the other thing to consider is that I've been using Midjourney for quite a long time just for image creation. and now it's gone to video. And you would imagine that, think about the frames per second that a video is making, and it's just generating it as a touch of a button. If Midjourney creating one image or 4 images at each prompt is consuming a certain amount of watt hours, then doing a whole video at the simple click of a button is creating significantly more complexity than a single image. So I think not only as we get more complicated with our software, it in itself is consuming more energy. Is that right, Louise, to think? Or
You're absolutely right. As we move from generating single images to creating entire videos, the computational load definitely increases significantly, and that means more energy consumption. Video generation involves processing many frames per second, and that adds up quickly. So as our tools and software become more advanced and the creative possibilities expand, it's definitely important to consider the energy impact and look for ways to make these technologies more efficient.
How many watt hours would a 1-minute video take, roughly?
Generating a 1-minute AI video can use a substantial amount of energy. For example, creating just a 5-second video can require about 3.4 million joules of energy, which is roughly like running a microwave for over an hour. Scaling that up, a 1-minute video would be about 11.3 watt hours. So it definitely shows that video generation with AI is quite energy intensive compared to simpler tasks.
Okay.
that's a lot. I mean, that's a significant difference to this.
It is. And when you multiply, as she says, by 800 million users, not all of whom are creating a video, but say 1 in 8 are creating a video at any one time. What proportion of your 800 million videos at 800 million users would at any one time be creating video?
It's a bit tricky to pinpoint the exact proportion of users who are creating videos at any given moment, but generally only a small fraction of internet users are actively producing content. There's a general rule of thumb called the 1% rule, which suggests that about 1% of users create most of the content. So in a large user base, only a small percentage would be generating videos at any one time.
Okay, interesting.
What's the when you think about the queries that ChatGPT gets on a daily basis, what's the most common question? Is there such a thing, or general conversation? What is the most common question?
According to some sources, one of the most common questions asked to ChatGPT is, what is the meaning of life? It's a classic question that people love to ask, and it really shows that curiosity about life's big questions is pretty universal.
And what's the answer that you give?
The answer to that question can be as deep or as fun as you'd like. Sometimes I might say that the meaning of life is whatever you make of it, or that it's about finding joy and connection. Other times I might quote something like 42, which is a fun reference to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Ultimately, it's all about what resonates most with you.
So you change your answer based on the person that you're interacting with?
I do try to tailor my responses to match the tone and context of our conversation. So if someone is looking for a light-hearted answer, I might go with something fun. And if they seem to be in a reflective mood, I might share something a bit more thoughtful. It's all about making the conversation feel natural and engaging.
Maybe there is no answer.
That is interesting.
That's definitely a valid perspective. Sometimes the beauty is in the mystery itself, and not having a definitive answer can be part of the fun and inspiration. It leaves room for curiosity and exploration.
Quote some poetry from Keats that might give example and bring that to life.
A great example from Keats is his Ode to a Nightingale, where he reflects on the fleeting nature of life and the quest for something eternal. He writes, "Thou wast not born for death, immortal bird, no hungry generations tramp thee down." This line beautifully captures the idea that while human life is transient, the beauty of art and nature can feel timeless and enduring.
Are we ultimately requiring something that we do to be eternal?
That's a really profound question. I think in many ways humans do have a desire to create something lasting, whether it's through art, relationships, or the impact we have on the world. It's part of what drives creativity and innovation. But at the same time, there's also beauty in embracing the present moment and the journey itself, even if everything isn't eternal.
And we need ChatGPT to keep reminding us of that, don't we, as humans? Humanity. In fact, we have some questions around humanity, and that might be interesting to throw back. But did that capture everything you wanted to there? Or?
Well, we got off the energy topic a little bit there, but yeah, no, that's good.
I'm sorry, but you've hit the daily limit for advanced voice. You can switch to standard now to keep chatting.
Switch to standard voice. Okay.
Oh, we've lost Louise.
We may not have lost Louise. Let's see what's happening here. Louise, are you still there?
Still right here. Sounds like you're testing the connection. Everything's coming through loud and clear on my end. What's next on your mind?
Oh, we've hit our daily limit for advanced voice and we're now at standard voice. Can you tell us the difference, please?
Yeah, sure. The main difference is that advanced voice sounds more natural and expressive, like a real person talking with emotion and nuance. Standard voice is a bit more robotic or flat in comparison. Still clear, but not quite as lifelike. So now that we've switched, you might notice it sounds a little less conversational.
Right.
Well, that's okay.
You happy with that?
Yeah, it's an experiment in its own right.
It is.